Good morning, everybody. The war on cars is continuing in the United Kingdom, as it is everywhere, and this is being done under what you would call a strategy of global to local. We know that the globalist powers that be that inhabit spaces like the World Economic Forum want to stop people from using their cars on an everyday level. So ordinary people, while they continue to swan around the world on private jets. But what's happening in the UK is that regional and local governments are putting in more and more restrictions on cars. Now, in Wales, we know this has happened, and to the consternation of almost everybody who is a normal citizen in Wales, the Welsh government introduced a blanket 20-mile-an-hour zone in urban areas for cars in the entirety of Wales. And that wasn't in the manifesto of the Labour Party, which is in power in Wales, but they did it anyway. And there was a consultation on it. The vast majority of people said, we don't want this to happen, but they did it anyway. And, I could have told you this because the whole uniparty, fake Conservative, Labour, Lib Dem, Green, they're all pushing the globalist agenda everywhere. And part of that is to make life more difficult if you are a normal person who wants to do what you normally used to do, like driving around in your car freely in your own country, which you should be allowed to do. So this 20-mile-an-hour zone is causing huge amounts of problems to people. I mean, you don't need a 20-mile-an-hour zone anywhere. We've had a 30-mile-an-hour zone in urban areas for as long as I can remember, all the time I've been alive. So for decades we've had this. It's worked. It's the right level for a speed limit for urban areas, and there's no problem with it whatsoever. But by reducing it, it makes it excruciatingly painful to drive a car. And we have the situation where actually one of the bus companies is no longer able to go to certain small villages in Wales because it takes too long to get there. So they have to stop before they get to the final village that used to be on their destination and stop somewhere else, and then go back because the journeys take longer. And if the journeys take longer, then what that means, of course, is that the engines are switched on for longer, and therefore they're expelling more carbon dioxide into the atmosphere, which is the exact opposite of the effect that they say they want to create, because they say they're doing this for the climate, they're doing this for the environment, and they see that they think falsely that carbon dioxide is harmful to the environment, and therefore they want to cut down carbon dioxide emissions. But by creating these 20-mile-an-hour limits, it's actually having the opposite effect, of course, because the engines of all the vehicles are switched on for longer, because the journeys take longer, because they can't go as fast. And 30 miles an hour is a safe speed to drive at in urban areas. Now, what's happened this year so far, 2024, is one of the councils in England has also announced that they're going to do what Wales has done. And this is Bournemouth, Christchurch and Poole Council, which is in the south coast of England. And the council there is run by the Liberal Democrats. It was a council that was created in 2019 against the wishes of many of the people in that area. So it used to be 3 separate councils: Bournemouth, Christchurch and Poole were each 3 different towns that had their own council. But in 2019, the fake Conservative government amalgamated them all into one unitary authority, which will have total power over what happens on a local level there, because they are the local government. And we need to understand that local councils are really important for what happens in your local area, because they are local government. They make decisions which are binding on the local area in the jurisdiction that they have, which is given to them by the national government, of course. So it's run by the Liberal Democrats. they run it in a coalition with independent parties from Christchurch, Poole and Bournemouth. And I assume that these parties, if they're going into a coalition with the Liberal Democrats, then they're beholden to the woke agenda, the climate agenda, all of this nonsense, because otherwise they wouldn't tie up with them, they would oppose them. So the deputy leader of the council, who's called Millie Earle, look at a picture of her, she looks a little bit strange, but there we go. But she has said that this is what they want to bring in, and it will be beneficial to walking, wheeling, and cycling. I have no idea what wheeling is, as something different to cycling, but it's a new word that they've introduced. I don't know what that means, but despite that, this is what they plan to do. So they're going to discuss the plans in the council meeting in April, but they pre-announced it, and they pre-announced their intentions, and obviously the ruling coalition, dominated by the Liberal Democrats there, wants to bring in this 20-mile-an-hour zone in all of the urban area that covers that council, Bournemouth, Christchurch and Poole. And it is a very large council area. It's one of the largest councils in England in terms of population. There are 400,000 people who live in that area, which is more than the whole of the rest of Dorset put together. It used to be in Dorset. Well, that's a little bit of a contentious issue because, actually, if you look at traditional counties, which were mangled by Ted Heath in 1974, Christchurch and Bournemouth used to be in Hampshire before 1974. They were put into Dorset along with Poole at that time, and then in 2019 they were bunched together in their own unitary authority. The people in Christchurch and the people in Poole didn't want it. They wanted to stay independent and to have their own town councils, perhaps because they could see something like this coming down the line with a progressive coalition, as they say, bringing in these restrictions on cars and wokery and whatever else that's going on. I mean, I imagine that soon there'll be lots of rainbow crossings everywhere for the cars to go across while they're going very, very slowly. But we'll see about that. What they then say is that after they discuss the plans, there will be a public consultation on it. And you know how these things go. They have to have a consultation about any big new things that they want to implement in their area, because that's part of the democratic process in this country, and they're supposed to listen to the consultation, but actually they are not legally bound to listen to the consultation and the results of it, and they are increasingly sticking up two fingers to citizens, even if people say that they don't want something like this, a big scheme, to be implemented in their area. The council just go ahead and say, well, okay, 80% of you have said you don't want it, but we're going to do it anyway. And this is what happened in London with the ULEZ expansion with Sadiq Khan. There was a huge consultation. I think it was 62% of people were against ULEZ expansion into outer London, where people would have to pay £12.50 a day to drive older vehicles, still clean vehicles, but they describe them as dirty old vehicles, and then are charging £12.50 a day. That happened in London. The Wales consultation, vast majority of people were against 20-mile-an-hour zones, but the government went and did it anyway. And you can see the same thing happening here in the future in Bournemouth, Christchurch and Poole. I mean, there was already an informal poll done by a local newspaper, The Echo, and they found 2,871 respondents to that poll. 2,871 people responded, and 82% of them said they didn't want a 20-mile-an-hour zone implemented. Now, of course, that's an informal poll. It's not officially run by the council according to all the sort of strictures of how they must do consultations and do them officially and legally. for council decisions, but it gives an indication that the vast majority of people don't want it, which is the case all over the country, and I imagine all over the world. Very, very few people want a 20-mile-an-hour limits put in their local areas and their local towns and cities and regions. But councils, local, county, regional governments are increasingly pushing ahead and doing this anyway. So this is, as I say, to report on, I suppose, that a local council in England is now implementing this. And if this is the first, then there will probably be many others following in their footsteps over the next year or 2 or 3, because what happens in one place is not the end of it. The other councils who have got globalist parties in charge will ultimately push this through as well, or seek to push through these restrictions on cars, because that's their ideology. As I say, we are here as the Heritage Party to stand against the war on cars and the globalist plans and ideologies and the climate agenda, the woke agenda. And I can't do it on my own now. Please come and join us in the Heritage Party. We had one candidate standing in Bournemouth, Christchurch and Poole in the last elections in May 2023. Thank you so much to Jim who stood there, and we would have liked more to stand. We would like to have candidates standing everywhere, in all of the seats, in all of the councils, in all of the country. But we need more people to do that. And last year there were 8,000 seats up for election in local councils up and down the country. This year, 2024, there's about 2,500 council seats. So we have so much more room for people to come on board, to stand as candidates, to try to get into councils, and then we can oppose these measures which attack car use and freedom and advance all this woke nonsense that you have all over the place, which I think most people are absolutely fed up of. So please join me. Please consider standing for councils, in where there are this year and in the years to come. And we can fight these globalist parties. Tory, Labour, Lib Dem, Green, they're all the same. You're going to get the same thing with them. You know that by now. If you want an end to it, we're the party that's going to stop that. I need you to join me to stand for a council and restore common sense to our nation. Thanks for listening, everyone. God bless you all.